I heard this recently from a father I was working with at the office. Is this really my beloved kid? Let's talk today about how teenagers sometimes destroy their parents' expectations. I'm Dr. Paul Jenkins, a professional psychologist. I've worked with children and families for my entire career, and I've noticed some things that are really important. Let's face the harsh realities, but then I'm going to give you some really practical steps that you can use as well. Going back to this father that I mentioned, is this really my beloved kid? I think in exasperation he also said, "This is not my kid," as he explained all of the things that his teenager was doing that were driving him crazy and just demolishing his expectations. And I listened with empathy. I'm a psychologist, I'm trained to do this. And then I responded, "Actually, you're right. This is not your kid. This is your teenager. They're different things, different animals." He hadn't really thought about it that way, but you think about it for just a minute. Teenagers are not the same as children. They're going through very different developmental tasks and milestones. They are not the same people that they were when they were kids. If you have a teenager, your kid no longer exists. Gone. Vicky and I had 4 children, none of which are children anymore. Yes, there are children, our offspring, but they're all adults. Well, what happened to our kids? They grew up. They're gone. They no longer exist on this planet. Now we have 4 adults that we love and cherish, and they've brought other people into our life, including grandkids, which we're really excited about. But the point that I'm making is that our kids don't keep, and neither do our teenagers, because they're only going to be teens for a short time, relatively speaking, and then they move on to being young adults, and then they move on to being full-fledged adults, and then they move on to being old people. So let's get it through our head right up front here that this is not our kid. This is our teenager. In saying that, I'm also going to acknowledge that that's sad. If one of our children dies, we hold a funeral. There's a marker that says, oh, this child is no longer in my life. That's not what happens when they turn into teenagers, but still we lose our child. And there's some grieving that happens. It's a natural part of being a parent and doing your job, which is to love them no matter what and even if. If you love them, you're going to be sad when they're gone. Give yourself a little bit of a chance to grieve the loss of your child. And I'm not even overstating that. I've talked to parents who really have a strong grief response when their children pass from one stage to the next. So give yourself a chance to feel that. Okay? This is important because you have to let go of what was in order to accept what is. And we have to accept what is in order to prepare for what is to be. As our children move through these stages, we're going to have some feelings. And if you're like me, you'll feel maybe that they pass through them a little too quickly. I miss my kids. I miss my teenagers. I don't have any of them anymore. I really enjoy these adults who are raising my grandkids. I'll throw out a little practical idea. When I mentioned earlier that if our child actually dies, we hold a funeral. You might consider doing a little mental funeral for your child, the child that was, so that you can let go and be able to move forward to really engage with and appreciate the teenager that you now have. So what are we going to do with this new person in our life? It really is a new person that didn't exist before. Yes, you had your child who had many of the same traits and characteristics, but now you have a teenager who's completely different from that child. Look at it as a new person that you get to know. And as you do that, notice where your expectations are. Expectations, from a psychological standpoint, are one of the most common causes of frustration and annoyance and anger and resentment, because we get it in our head that things should be a certain way. See, that's the expectation. And then when it turns out different, we feel frustrated or annoyed. The mistake that most of us make as parents when we feel frustration and annoyance is that we blame our teenager. We blame them for how we feel. Look, it's not your teenager's fault or responsibility that you feel any particular thing. You're never wrong about how you feel. But your feelings are based on your own thoughts, your own beliefs, your own expectations that have been violated. That's what causes your feelings. Own it, because in owning it, you have a little bit of power to steer it in a little different direction. If you feel frustrated, realize that that comes from your own expectations, and those can change. Stop blaming your teenager. Hey, real quick before we get into the rest of this video, parenting is not something that you should do alone. Let us be on your team to support you in this important job. Click that subscribe button. It's right down there. Once you click it, you'll want to hit the notification bell, and that way you'll know every time we have a new video for you. Let's go back to something that I acknowledged earlier when I said that children don't keep, and neither do teenagers. This is a very brief window of time where you get to know someone that you didn't know before. Get to know them. Start to work on that relationship as if it were a brand new relationship in your life, and be fascinated with who this person is, what their potential is, what their capabilities are, what their skills are, what their interests are. Get to know them. Our kids are not little carbon copies of us, and they're not there to fulfill our unmet wishes and dreams. That's our job, to live our own life, not to have our kids live it for us. So get to know them on their own right. As you're doing this, choose to enjoy every stage of development. I think we do ourselves a disservice when we talk about teenagers as being the bane of our existence or the source of all of our problems. They're not. They're delightful people that we are getting to know. And think about it for a minute. If I gave you a challenge to enjoy your teenager for a full afternoon, I mean sincerely enjoy it. Now, most of you are probably thinking, yeah, I could do that. We have fun together. I've enjoyed them before. Well, could you do it for a full day? Could you do it for 2 days? Could you do it for 3? Could you do it for a full week where you sincerely enjoy this person? And if you had to, if your life depended on it, or if there were some big reward if you did, what would you have to change about your own behavior or your approach in order to enjoy them? See, that's a pretty useful question. And that gets us going on a track that we can actually have some control over. Choose to enjoy them at every stage. And one more practical thing. Learn the skill set that parents of teenagers need to know. We handle consequences differently. We handle communication differently. We handle a lot of things differently when our kids are teenagers than we did when they were younger kids. All of those skills that you learned parenting your youngsters are going to be useful and helpful as you parent your teens, but there's an additional skill set that you get to add on top of that, particularly when it comes to consequences and communication. Just as a little insight to that, teenagers are trying to control or drive their own life. This is a time of life when it's important for them to transition into more responsibility and more control over their own life. As parents, we get to shift with them. And if we try to maintain control where we should be allowing that control to shift over to our teen, it creates conflict and frustration. It's not particularly easy to develop a skill set. You think about learning a language or learning a new musical instrument. It takes a lot of practice. And parenting teens is a very similar kind of a skill set. It takes a lot of practice. So give yourself the time, be patient with yourself, surround yourself with people who will support that journey for you, and jump in, because it's going to be some work to develop that skill set. I hope you found that helpful, and I'm not going to leave you hanging. The next video that you'll want to watch is 5 things every parent of a teenager needs to know. I'm teaming up with my wife Vicki to bring you some powerful content there. Cue up that video next, and I'll see you there.